Here in Britain, there are 4 recognised falcon species that are either resident or migrant visitors to this island. Most notable is, of course, the peregrine falcon, the largest and most powerful falcon breeding in the UK and most of Europe, infamous for being the fastest animal in the world when it enters its trademark dive or stoop. Perhaps the most commonly encountered in the UK and most of Europe, however, is the common kestrel, a considerably smaller and more elegant falcon that is best recognised for its unique hovering flight behaviour, which it uses to scan the ground to hunt for small prey, particularly in habitats associated with agriculture. Seeing a relatively small raptor, roughly the size of a pigeon, hovering in this position is a giveaway that this is indeed a kestrel. Then there is the hobby, which is similar in size to, if not marginally smaller than the kestrel, but has coloration somewhat more like that of the peregrine, except for its distinctive streaked and then reddish underparts. This rapid-flying and very long-winged little falcon is a hunter of airborne prey, particularly small birds and large insects, notably dragonflies, which it will actually consume on the wing. A migratory species, the hobby breeds in Britain and Europe during the summer and migrates south to Africa during the winter. The smallest of all British falcons, and indeed all falcons across Eurasia, is the merlin. Though despite its small size, this falcon has tremendous stamina and agility and is an expert at hunting small avian quarry. Small songbirds such as skylarks, pipits and wagtails are among this small falcon's favoured prey, which it chases down in a high-speed acrobatic flight. This image has been altered to provide an interesting visual comparison between the British falcon species minus the merlin and another species of common raptor of similar size, the Eurasian sparrowhawk. The sparrowhawk, along with the other native species of true hawk in Britain, the goshawk, can quickly be told apart from true falcons by the proportionally shorter, more rounded wings and noticeably long tail. The wing shape, however, is perhaps the most useful tool in distinguishing the sparrowhawk from the similar-sized species of falcon, particularly the kestrel and hobby. When distinguishing the 4 main falcon species from each other, each have their own distinctive characteristics. In terms of size, the peregrine is the largest falcon breeding in the UK, by a considerable amount regarding larger female specimens in relation to other British falcons, though this may not always be apparent if the individual is soaring at great height. In flight, peregrines have long pointed wings like other falcons, though theirs are somewhat more broadly based compared to other species, and they have a relatively short, broad tail. Their body appears comparatively more bulky and muscular compared to smaller raptors, which combined with their pointed wings and short tail can sometimes give them an almost anchor-shaped silhouette at certain angles in flight. As touched on earlier, sometimes when observing falcons in flight, it's not always possible to gauge their size accurately as they sometimes fly really high, but even when considering relatively small male peregrines or tearsals, they are still considerably heftier than the Eurasian hobby or kestrel. In relation to other falcons present in Britain, the kestrel is arguably the easiest species to separate from the others visually, with the mixture of orange and grey coloration in males and the reddish-brown in females being quite distinct from the coloration of other falcons. As mentioned before, kestrels are very close to the Eurasian hobby in size, and could be confused for hobbies in level flight if their coloration isn't visible. But compared to other falcon species, kestrels have a slightly longer tail, and their wings, while still relatively long and pointed, are not as sharply pointed as compared to peregrines or hobbies. Of course, the most distinctive trait of kestrels when they are in flight is when they engage in their distinctive hovering posture, looking for prey on the ground. This distinctive flight behaviour is typically not observed in hobbies, peregrines or merlins, and so is a distinctive feature in separating the kestrel from the others. Merlins in flight are very dashing and agile, usually not flying with the same kind of buoyancy seen in kestrels. Their wings, while still pointed, unlike a sparrowhawk's, are relatively short compared to the other species, and their smaller size is also a noticeable trait in separating them. Merlins have comparatively much more pointed wings than the sparrowhawk does, though their primaries or leading wing feathers don't seem to be as long and as pronounced as other falcons, such as hobbies or peregrines for example, and they don't hover like kestrels do. Also, unlike the sparrowhawk, merlins are most frequently observed hunting and flying in open spaces, often hunting in habitats such as moorland, heathland and open farmland, and very rarely observed in woodland habitats or parkland, at least here in the UK. When hobbies are on the wing, they are most likely to be confused with a peregrine or a kestrel, but they too have distinctive features to look out for. A typical falcon, they are exceptionally fast and agile on the wing, with a swift and elegant build, more so like that of the similar-sized kestrel, and less so compared to the more muscular peregrine. Their tail feathers are somewhat intermediate in length between a kestrel and a peregrine's, at least in relation to their body size, but they have exceptionally long pointed wings as previously mentioned. In fact, they are actually slightly longer than those of a kestrel, thanks to their exceptionally elongated primaries or leading wing feathers, and their wings also appear to be much more narrow at the base compared to peregrines, giving them a striking sickle-shaped appearance. Coloration is also a distinctive trait in identifying this species, particularly when regarding mature hobbies, with the darkened head, streaked underside, and most importantly of all, the reddish-orange feathers around the bird's legs and undertail, proving especially helpful in distinguishing this bird. Although the main focus of this has been separating the hobby from other British falcon species, the UK does occasionally receive visitors in the form of other raptor species that are present in mainland Europe that would not normally be encountered in this area, including other species of falcon that could provide a source of confusion. For example, the red-footed falcon, which is comparable in size to the Eurasian hobby and kestrel, is a species found across Eurasia that is not usually considered a breeding species here in the UK, but has become a more frequent visitor in recent years, with as many as 58 individuals reported across the UK as of 2025. This species of migratory falcon is very striking in its coloration, with adult males like this one being a striking bluish-grey, along with similar reddish tarsal feathers to the hobby, and of course reddish-coloured feet. Mature females, in contrast, have a set of more yellowish or beige-coloured feathers on their head and underside, and a greyish, more faintly striped dorsal side, with distinctive black markings around their eyes, usually without the presence of a distinctive malar stripe, a feature indicative of many falcon species. Juvenile red-footed falcons are very likely to be confused with juvenile hobbies, as they are very similar in size with similar proportions, along with sharing a very similar light brown coloration. However, unlike hobbies and peregrines in juvenile plumage, these falcons lack the darkened headcap of the other species, with female red-footed falcons as well as juveniles, often having a white cheek patch linked to a white throat, with the darkened patches around their eyes seeming to resemble a Zorro mask rather than the distinctive malar stripes seen in other species of falcon. Unlike hobbies, red-footed falcons are also observed to hover, though their coloration should help differentiate them from the kestrel. Once again, the long pointed wings with pronounced primary feathers, along with the presence of reddish trousers and streaked underparts, along with the darkened head and no hovering flight, should help differentiate the hobby from species like the red-footed falcon as well as the kestrel, but other species may prove more challenging. Another species of falcon that has become a visitor to the British Isles in recent years is the Eleonora's falcon, a species that has even more in common with the Eurasian hobby in many ways, and is usually seen across the Mediterranean and Africa, though a few longer-staying individuals have been observed in southern England, including this year in the summer. It is in fact slightly larger than the Eurasian hobby on average, but still somewhat smaller and more elegantly built than the peregrine, and it has very similar physical proportions and coloration to the hobby on many occasions, with very long pointed wings and a long tail, along with a similarly sleek, elegant build. After all, this falcon is in fact part of the hobby group itself. Adult Eleonora's falcons actually have two different colour morphs within their plumage, one of which is a nearly all-black dark-morph falcon, which is relatively easy to identify visually as far as European falcons are concerned. The more frequently occurring paler morph of Eleonora's falcon is somewhat more like that of a Eurasian hobby in many ways, sharing the pronounced darkened head and malar stripe, streaked underside, and even reddish trousers. However, as well as being somewhat larger, Eleonora's falcons also appear to have a marginally longer tail in proportion to their body, as well as slightly broader based wings, compared to the Eurasian hobby. Their plumage on top and below also appears slightly darker than hobbies, with their underparts having a mixture of yellow-brown and sooty undertones, as you can see by this individual, in contrast to the paler buff or greyish underparts of most hobbies. Also, somewhat like peregrines and unlike Eurasian hobbies, Eleonora's falcons typically inhabit and breed on rocky coastlines, including in areas such as Greece and Cyprus, though it should be mentioned that birds on passage could turn up almost anywhere.